Hello, everyone. We're now going to talk about the integumentary system. We're going to do that by identifying all the structures of the integumentary system. My name's Dr. Morton, and let's talk about skin. And so, the integumentary system, this word integument means to cover, and it is the organ of the body that covers the entire body that you simply know as your skin. And so, when we take a look at the outside of the body, the skin then is consisting of the following layers. And what we're going to do is take this little square inch of skin, we're going to blow it up, and everywhere you see a black line, that's where we're going to add a label and talk about what those structures are and their functions. Let's start first with the epidermis. Epi means upon, dermis is the skin, actually, another many layers name. And so dermis is the thick layer in the middle that we'll talk about. Epi means upon. And the epidermis consists of multiple layers of cells stratified squamous epithelium. There's the stratum basale, which is the bottom layer, and these cells mitotically divide, and they give rise to either base cells that stay in the stratum basale or daughter cells that move up, and they get filled with keratin, and as they move from layer to layer, they eventually die, and so the whole top layer of your skin, the stratum corneum, are dead cells. And the function of this stratified squamous epithelium, full of keratin, that is found in the epidermis is the following. One, it's going to protect from abrasion, such as scratching an itch. When you scratch an itch of skin or you take an article of cloth on or off, it sloughs off these dead cells at the superficial surface. Another is that it is for waterproofing. I didn't mean to point to his armpit there. And so waterproofing keeps all the water inside the body and also keeps all the water from outside getting into the body. And finally, it's going to protect us from the sun, the harmful effects of the ultraviolet radiation. And the way that the epidermis functions in that way is that there are these cells in the stratum basale called melanocytes that secrete melanin. It's a pigment that then helps surround these other cells and then protects the underlying cells from this harmful radiation. Okay. Now, a structure that comes from the epidermis are sweat glands, and sweat glands give rise to a duct that gives rise to sweat pores that go to the external surface. So sweat glands are actually an appendage, an invagination of the epidermis, but it goes all the way down into the dermis. And so sweat glands have these glands down at the bottom. They produce sweat, which is primarily water with salts, that then goes to the surface and goes out those pores. And so, for example, here we've got one of those, that blue circle represents some water, sweat, filled with salt, and then it goes through these ducts to the surface. Then once this sweat reaches the surface, it then pulls heat from the skin, which enables it to evaporate. And so that's its function, is that sweat cools us down. It's a thermoregulator. It's under also sympathetic innervation. All right, so another appendage of the epidermis are these hair follicles. And so a hair follicle then is just simply keratin. And down at the root, we've got these living keratinocytes, but the rest all the way up of this hair follicle is just dead keratin. And then once it reaches the surface, then you've got these hairs that project out. And so there in this picture we see, and they look like little blades of grass very far apart. But in reality, all these hair follicles in places like the head are really close together, whereas other places, for example, the front of your forearm or palm of the hand, they're either absent or there's only a few of them. So it all depends on where they are in the body. But these hair follicles are also invaginations of the epidermis. Going from the hair follicle, there is these smooth muscles called arrector pili muscles or arrector pili muscles, and they course from the hair follicle root all the way to these invaginations of the epidermis. And what happens is when these arrector pili muscles contract under sympathetic innervation, they cause this wrinkling of the skin. And so arrector pili muscles also are innervated by sympathetic nerves, and they then cause these goosebumps, these wrinkling, these divots in the skin when the arrector pili muscles contract. I'm not quite sure why they're called goosebumps, because I don't think they'd all look like a goose. So next are these sebaceous glands, and these sebaceous glands are outpouchings of the hair follicle. And so sebaceous glands are a type of exocrine gland. They secrete a product called sebum, And sebum then goes and lines a hair follicle and goes to the surface of the skin. And sebum is this oily substance that prevents your hair and the top of your skin from drying out. So here we've got a section of normal skin. And there's a sebaceous gland, and it secretes sebum into the hair follicle. And what happens then is there's some of the sebum. If it gets blocked, we call this a whitehead, because you got white blood cells that come and attack the sebum, and it builds up the sebum, and then the white blood cells die from attacking some certain skin bacteria, and you call this a whitehead. And then when that sebum reaches the surface and becomes oxidized, we call it a blackhead. All right. Now, so there's sebaceous gland. Next, we're going to have the dermis. And the dermis is the middle layer of the skin made of dense, irregular, collagenous connective tissue for the most part, and it's very thick. It makes the hide of the skin. And so some of the structures we have inside that dermis are sensory receptors. So there's a Meissner's corpuscle. This is important for light touch, so that you see that circle, that when something touches the skin, this is what senses that and sends down that yellow line, which is the axon from this sensory organ, and sends information to the spinal cord. We also have these Pacinian corpuscles, and these are more dealing with deep pressure and vibration, so that if you were touching the side of a dishwasher, you'd tell that it's vibrating. The Pacinian corpuscles will pick up those vibrations. And there are other numerous types of nerve endings, such as pain receptors and such, that are found in the dermis. And then finally, the hypodermis. This prefix hypo means below. And so in the hypodermis, we've got all these blood vessels. And the blood vessels give rise to vessels that go all the way into the dermis and to the base of the epidermis. So the epithelium in the epidermis is avascular. We don't have blood vessels up there. But in the dermis and the hypodermis, we do. And all those blood vessels come up from there. We also have adipose tissue in this hypodermis, and it's thicker in some areas, think of your belly, and much thinner in some areas, think of the skin in the front of your forearm. So, my friends, there we have all the different structures of the skin now labeled, and when you go to lab, we're going to be able to take a look at these under a microscope. Thank you so much.